Whereas in boxing, we have a ranking system within 4 or 5 different governing bodies, and those governing bodies have their own financial agenda, and the one governing body doesn't rank the other governing body's champion. So that's what makes it almost impossible to get these unification fights. Like and that's fundamentally the issue with boxing. That's why this year on the podcast we did a Ranger t-shirt. In fact, I might even have one on. We did a whole in the belts campaign to.
You were saying
I've got one. Yeah,
that would be the best thing that could happen to boxing, is just get rid of all these governing bodies, because each one takes a percentage of the purse of both fighters.
Yeah, when Jordan told me that, I couldn't believe that.
Sanction fees, mate. People have got serious beach houses on the back of sanction fees. I'm telling you.
Let's just hope it happens. When AJ and Fury eventually happens, 2025 or whatever it'll be. When that eventually happens, and we got and the big story is 150 million kitty, blah 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 blah. About 6-7% of that will go to the sanctioning bodies, maybe more, maybe 10%.
Fucking ridiculous.
Just old men who live in Puerto Rico, who've got a little blazer on, who are going, yeah, we'll sanction that. So let's say Eddie Hearn wants to do a WBC silver belt or whatever. He has to pay his yearly fee to the WBC of a couple of grand just to be part of, promoter that works with the WBC. Then he goes to them and goes, right, I want to do a WBC silver title fight. And they go, sound, okay, well that's going to cost you for that as well, and then you've got to pay for the belt, and then we'll tell you what the officials are, so you've got to pay for them as well. And it is absolutely extortionate.
That's absurd. That is.
We talk about fighters not getting what they deserve, and yet these governing bodies are rolling in tens of millions of dollars year after year after year after year. And the argument is, but fans want title fights. TV companies want title fights. You can't do a show live on Sky Sports without there being a title fight at the end. You fucking can.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you
just match the number 2 guy with the number 3 guy and go, whoever wins this fights the champ. Yeah. You're all happy?
Just have one big massive leaderboard.
Exactly.
And it's just right, 1 versus 2.
Which is exactly what the UFC does.
Yeah.
So this was the beauty of basically building a sport 25 years ago.
Yeah.
When you're a massive boxing fan and you're into martial arts and whatever else, and you think, let's make Ultimate Fighting Championship, blah blah. And they did buy it. It was already up and running. But when they bought it, they went, right, unified rules. Let's get this shit on TV. Let's get a ranking system. Let's make it nice and clear, like a pyramid for fans, so it's dead easy to follow. 11 weight divisions, 11 champions. That's it. And the only time they have an interim belt now is if, say, the champion gets a serious injury, going to be out for 18 months. Okay, we're not going to strip you. Let's have it interim. As soon as you're fit, no warm up, you fight the winner of that belt, and then we sling the interim in the bin. That's how it works. And I think that would bring so many more eyeballs to the sport of boxing.
I'll be honest again, because I'm not, a proper enthusiast into the boxing. I don't understand the difference, because I don't understand one belt's got a bit more respect on it than others, like the WBO or whatever. But I don't know all of that.
Well, the governing bodies just come along. I think the WBC, IBF, WBO, WBA, they're like the ones that people class as the main belts, but they've sort of come along incrementally as well.
Yeah.
But
that's what I mean. I think not maybe most, but I think the fair weather boxing fan doesn't know that's got a bit more.
That's why UFC, and I'd love to get your views on this, Nick. That is why, in my opinion, MMA and UFC, you can probably include Bellator and PFL and stuff in that as well. That is why they're catching up with boxing, because it's simplified. People sit and watch it and they go, who's the champion of the welterweight division? Kamaru Usman. Okay, who's you gonna fight next? Yeah, there's the top 5. Be one of them. Do you know what I mean? You say, who's Joshua going to fight next? Fury, but he's got that sort of mandatory with Usyk. He might have to fight Luis Ortiz. Kubrat Pulev's waiting for a fight. It's too. And people say to me all the time, like, who's the champion of that division? You go, how long you got?
Exactly. Josh Hill at the moment, the unified champion of his weight division, super lightweight. I would love him to just get all 4 belts and a fucking big welding mask and just weld them all together and just go, right, that's it now. Yeah. All the governing bodies can fuck off. I've got all the belts. Whoever fights me, take the belts. And I promise you, I'll always fight the number 1 contender. And take control of the sport. Someone's got to do it. We try and get Eddie to do it all the time. Eddie's the biggest promoter in the world now. And he's been incredible for British boxing. Absolutely incredible. And I think it's really bold that he's leaving Sky and going to the Zone, a streaming channel. But if you ever wanted more of a statement in terms of how television is going, then that is it. If you think this is where it's going to end, you're kidding yourself, you know. We'll all have Premier League channel soon, and there won't be any Sky or BT or any of that. Premier League will go, wait a minute, we can charge everyone on the planet a tenner, and you get to watch every Premier League sound. Let's just do that and make even more money. That's ultimately where it's going. All sport will go the same way. But in regards to the belts, you say to Eddie all the time, you're at the forefront now. You could just say, right, Matchroom, with our partner DAZN, we are not going to work with any other governing belt body except maybe WBO or Ring Magazine, even better, the Ring Magazine belt. Yeah. Ring Magazine belt is only presented by the magazine, boxing magazine Ring, to two fighters who are the number 1 and number 2 in the world. Whenever they fight, Ring Magazine will go, okay, well that's for the number 1 spot now, officially. We'll throw a Ring Magazine belt at it. So you don't get them that often. But obviously, when you get, because they're impartial, supposedly impartial, because they're working off an independent ranking system, you'd like to think more often than not that's the right two people to prove who is the best in that weight division. That's the one that stands up. Get rid of all the rest of them. Like WBC are the oldest. They were the first world governing body, and they brought in the 10-9 scoring system that boxing uses today. In fact, MMA uses it as well. It was brought in by the WBC, and then the others all came on afterwards. The WBO came in our lifetime. WBO came in the 80s. But those 4 belts are the 4 belts that you can truthfully claim to be a world champion. The problem is, the WBA have the WBA world champion, the WBA super world champion, the WBA global champion, the WBA intercontinental champion, the WBA international champion.
That's just like, I want to make some more. How can we fucking make as much money as possible?
That is as simple as it is. That is exactly
Everyone can see it. This is what's wrong with boxing. Everyone can see it. Now, the other issue with boxing, because before you tee me up about is UFC taking over in MMA, the other issue with boxing is we've all been to a live boxing show. You go to a live boxing show, there's 10 fights on. If you see 2 competitive fights, you've done well. And I've been going to boxing shows 30 years. If you get to see 2 fights that are actually competitive, you've cracked it, you've had a good night. Because most of it is 7 or 8 fights where you go, right, well, that kid's going to win. And that Latvian kid over there with the fat belly, he's clearly not going to win, he's here to survive. And that's boxing, and that's what it's been serving up my entire life. And there's only so long you can get away with that, because it was the only fight sport, it was the only professional fight sport. Now it isn't. Now mixed martial arts, not only breathing down its neck, in a lot of ways it's outselling boxing 10-1.
Yeah, couldn't agree.
So boxing can't just continue down this road of putting shit fights on and then having a half-decent co-main or main event. It's got to pull its socks up and go, wait a minute, actually, fucking hell. UFC selling out tickets without even announcing who's on the bill. UFC go, we're doing UFC London tomorrow. It'll be sold out in 20 minutes. You know? And other than AJ, you ain't selling out arenas with anybody in this country unless you build the undercard and start, we're going to put this on, we're going to put that on. But again, even AJ fights, you might get AJ... Callum Smith, let's take New York for example, it's just sprung to mind. You got Callum Smith against, gets a world-class knockout. Guy was a middleweight though, really. You got Katie Taylor against Delphine Bassoon, that was a good fight. The rest of the card was shite. But obviously AJ gets beat, it was overshadowed, whatever else. But that's as good as boxing gets. And we got 3 competitive fights on there.
Out of 10, yeah.
Out of 10.
Even when you look at the betting, most boxing weekends, most of them are like 1 to 33.
Yeah.
It's just, they're not competitive at all, are they?
Well, have a look at the UFC. Just have a look at the UFC this weekend, have a look at the betting odds. That's why people always come at me on social media, have any tips for the UFC? Yeah, mate, but I'm pissing in the wind. You know what I mean? It's UFC.
Fucking need to listen to him, he fucking doesn't.
A large part of my life is betting.
Right.
On betting on only boxing and UFC, a few horse racing when we get the little tips. But when you go through a UFC card, as you rightly say, it's so difficult. You've got to put in so many hours of research in order to get any angle.
Yeah.
I do quite well on boxing in terms of method of victory markets because I have a good understanding of people who are going to be able to get past 10 and 12 rounds and who are going to be able to survive someone who can't quite punch as hard enough to get them out of there. But the way UFC is going, like to flip it back from boxing, for example, Paddy Pimblett, when he goes in, Paddy, correct me if I'm wrong, will face another person who is, harbours hopes of being world champion one day, right? And he won't go in and fight, I've got respect for them, but someone who's sort of 10 and 249, do you know what I mean? He'll go in and fight someone who's saying, right, I'm going for the belt as well. And that is the beauty of it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that is why you're getting people now going, oh, you know, I used to think that was cage fighting, but it's good, isn't it? Do you know, and people say it to me all the time.
But even now, like, not necessarily young people, but certainly older people go,
Yeah.
it's the cage though, isn't it? And like, you do realise that you can't climb on the cage and jump off. You're like, the cage isn't razors, you know what I mean? The cage is there, so if someone shoots for the takedown, you don't fall through the ropes. Like, the sport learned that early on. Shit, we need a cage, otherwise people will just be falling through the ropes all the time. So that's why the cage is there. Don't be threatened by it. It's there to protect the fighters and keep the fight enclosed. But yeah, there's, you know, I think we've moved on so much, and thankfully it's a generational thing. So I've got a 17-year-old nephew that has been to a boxing gym, done a bit of boxing training. If the big fights are coming up, he'll be like, oh, are you going to Tyson Fury? Or, you know, there's a passive interest there. But him and all his mates are fucking glued to bits about UFC. They know about UFC every weekend. They know who's on. Oh, such and such is on. Oh, you spoke to such and such the other day. Oh my God. And I'm like, how do you know about some Kazakhstan? Like, it's not me. Two fights. Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing. And I'm like, it's definitely a generational thing.
Yeah.
When we were kids, people on the playground dancing around going, oh, I'm Nazim, look at me, I'm Prince Naz, what?
Yeah.
Now kids are going, I'm Conor McGregor.
I'm Khabib.
But I think it's definitely a generational thing, and it's because MMA as well as grew up on social media. You know, the social media age, it got early on. UFC, we've got our own social media. If you look at their YouTube numbers,
you say this all the time, don't you, George?
The content of the UFC is unrivaled, I think.
UFC Embedded is basically like 24/7. We used to get for boxing, Pacquiao Mayweather 24/7.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, he's a boss. The UFC, I've been churning them out for pretty much every numbered event for the last 20 years and just putting it on YouTube, on their YouTube account.
Yeah, no,
so their YouTube figures are astronomical. So they've got such a jump on boxing. And Eddie's right. Eddie Hearn is basically trying to copy the UFC model. But it'll never be competitive like the UFC until boxing changes, because the UFC basically is the NFL. What the UFC did is go, right, rather than have promoters and other promoters, rival promoters with us, we'll take over the UFC, we'll build it bigger. Like, they're big in Japan, Pride, we'll buy them, take all their fighters. Oh, all the little fellas fight in WEC, World Extreme Champion, right, we'll have them, boom, we'll buy them out as well. And that's what they did. They just bought the best promotions in the world at the time. All you fighters are for us now, UFC. Right, we are the NFL, basically, of MMA. So any MMA fighter training in any gym in the world isn't talking about going, oh, I want to, you know, fight for this promoter or fight for that. They're just going, I want to get the UFC. Because once you get in the UFC, you've kind of made it.
And I guess if they've got that many fighters, they can put on shows every week then.
They do.
It's a road show, isn't it? Like Harlem Globetrotters, they just go around and, you know, you might be English, but you'll be fighting on UFC, you know, you'll be Phoenix or something like that. But
prior to lockdown, every weekend, all over the world, about 750 fighters on their roster. It's currently evolving. And it's one of them, you lose 3 or 4 fights on a spin and you haven't been entertaining. Sorry, Ace, go back to the lower leagues, boom, next signing.